us, tooting us, shooting us, bobtail wildcat in the West. Yeah, shit it!
What's up, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we're going to set up our own self-hosted Git repository with the Gitea platform in 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, you're going to have your own version of GitHub. Why? Well, I mean, to have your own Git is kind of cool, right? You can go to all your clients and say, hey, guess what? You know, all of your code is hosted in my Git. It's not a GitHub, it's not a Bitbucket or GitLab. But why not use GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab, or any of the other providers out there? Well, you might have some clients that have more stricter internal security policies. And they may say, well, GitHub is a cloud-based shared repository service, and we don't allow that. So what do? You leave the project and leave all that money on the table? Or do you say, well, hold on a minute. I have my own Git set up. It could be on a bare bones server inside your office in the basement, or you could be also be using AWS, Azure, any of the hosting providers out there, and you set it up. It belongs to you. You're the only one who's using it, so it's not shared. So, what's our agenda for today? We are going to first spin up using AWS. We're going to spin up an EC2. We are going to set up the security of that system using a two-layered firewall. There's the AWS security groups firewall, and then on the actual instance, I'm going to set up the firewall to block everything except for the ports that are absolutely necessary. We're then going to install Git, wget, and Apache. I'm going to use Apache as a proxy so I don't have to use port 3000, which is what Gitea uses. I want people to access the system over port 80 or port 443 later on once we have our SSL certificate installed. Once I have Apache installed, I'm going to install the database. Today we're going to use Mariodb. Gitea is compatible with MariodB/MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQLite, and TIDB. But again, we're using Mariodb. Once that's all done, I'm going to set up the SSL certificate so that we have encryption here. In a later video, I'm going to show you how to further harden your server and further harden your Apache, whether you're using fail to ban or bad bots to block any sniffers or scrapers, regexes, to make sure that your system is as secure as humanly possible. So to our initial security level, as I said, we're going to use two-layer firewalls. There is the AWS security groups that acts as a firewall to say only traffic on these particular ports is allowed. I could further go ahead and say only traffic from these IP addresses, for example, my office or my home, is allowed through. And then the second level is actually on the instance itself. I'm going to set up the firewall to block everything except for what we absolutely need. And then Gitea is going to be on that system. So let's jump right in and do the AWS security. It's pretty simple. It's basically click and type. So once you're on the EC2 area and you see instances here, you go down to security groups. Right now I have a default security group. I click on create. I'm going to call this web. Web access ports 8443. I'm going to leave it to my default VPC. I'm going to add a rule for inbound, and I'm going to go down to HTTP. I'm going to say from anywhere, and this is where you could ultimately say, if you wanted to only do your specific office, you could say, for example, my IP here, and it takes my current internet IP, but I'm going to say anywhere. And I'm going to call this port 80 for my description. I'm going to add another rule here, and you could create different security rules, security groups. You could say one is only for HTTP, one is for HTTPS, but I'm redirecting HTTP to HTTPS later, so here it doesn't really matter for me. I'll just combine these two. I'm allowing all external traffic for updates and packages and all that kind of stuff. You click on create the group. It creates the group here, 80443. And I'm going to go back here. And because I have default allows everything, which I don't want, I need to create one for SSH. Now, when I create my instance, the system is going to, it gives me the ability to create a new one. But you know what? I want to create my own here. Same VPC, add a new rule, click here, SSH, I'm going to allow anywhere for now. Later on, I would probably change it to my own IP address or my office's IP address, or I'd write a script that that communicates over the AWS API to update every time my home network router reboots, for example, and I get a new IP address. I can go in here, clean up the IP address list, add my new IP address, and then I'll always have access from my home if my my IP address changes. So I'm going to create that security group. Now, bada bing, bada boom, I have my web and my SSH security groups. So my firewall in AWS is now set up. So first thing I want to do here is create an EC2 instance. I want to create a server. I am going to scroll down here and I'm going to use Ubuntu 18 long-term service. I'm going to stick with the free micro because I don't really need the power right now. If this was a production environment, I would start with a T2 medium because of the CPUs and the memory, and it can go as high as you want. But this is pretty good for most smaller instances, freelancers, for example. I then click Next, and this to configure the instance details. You can go get really deep into all of these settings. The most important for me right now are selecting my zone, and I want to enable auto-assign public IP, otherwise it'd be difficult for me to access it from outside. I then click Next, and I only want a 30 gigabyte hard drive for this test machine, for this tutorial. You can go as high as you want, but just remember that there are costs involved with more storage. So this is what I was talking about before. It's trying to auto-create a SSH rule for me, or a new security group, but I don't need it because I already created one a few seconds ago. They do that by default because the last thing you want to do is create a server and not be able to SSH it, not be able to access it. So I clicked on select from my existing ones, and I chose my SSH and my previously configured web security groups. Cool, everything's here exactly how I wanted it. I click on launch. I select my previous key pair. You can either create a new one, or if you've already created one, you can select one. I'm going to click launch. Wait for that system to come online. I'm going to check to make sure that my key is here. Yep. Okay. I didn't click the button. So I'm going to change the name here to Gitea. You notice that since I selected enable the auto-generate public IP address, I now have a wonderful IP address. 52.89.207.191. So if I copy that and go here, I get dead air. There's nothing there. Why? Because I haven't connected it to a subdomain. So I'm going to do this off screen. No, sign in using a different one. I have to log into my is it a 0 or 2? I don't know. Really? Well, thank you very much. So I'm in my domain controller here on a different screen. Gotta pick out a domain. What domain do I want to use? I'm going to use deploy.dev. So deploy.dev, I'm going to create a subdomain. I'm going to create a subdomain cleverly named git.deploy.dev that has my IP address. See, nothing's there. Boom, boom, boom. So if I happen to, okay, so let's see. DNS takes a couple of minutes to update. I'm going to go to launch and try to connect to my system. I'm going to use this big terminal here, terminal window here. I'm going to accept the fingerprint. I am now on my server. So I have my firewall set up, my AWS firewall set up. I'm going to go ahead and update this system just in case any new updates have come in since this image in AWS has been created. upgrade. Yes, you can see here that it's updating apt utils, cloud init, curl, distro, git. So Git's already installed. This is going to update it. Just in case your system doesn't have Git yet installed, I'm going to leave the command in the file in this PowerPoint, as well as all of the commands that you can use later in order to so that it's easier for you. Yeah. So this is actually my the commands I'm going to use to set up my server firewall after I do my updates. So right now I'm running the upgrade, excuse me, the apt upgrade to upgrade any of the existing packages within this distribution. Takes a couple seconds. Yeah, come on. It's got to think. It's got to do stuff. It's got to carry paper from here to there. Let's go. Almost. This microphone is annoying in my face, blocking my view. So, okay, everything is now up to date. So, what do I want to do, right? Actually, I already ran these commands, excuse me. So what I want to do is I want to set up the instance, this virtual machine's firewall. I first want to create rules. I don't want to enable it first because then I'd be locked out. I want to enable rules. I like to enable the 3000 rule for internal communication in case I have other servers inside my VPC that need to communicate with that system over port 3000. I need to enable SSH on the server itself. If I didn't enable it and then I enabled the firewall, I would not be able to SSH in. I want to enable the rule to allow HTTP traffic and enable the rule for HTTPS. And once those rules have been enabled, created, I want to enable the firewall. So let me go over here. Oh, come on. Always worried about spelling. I copy and paste those in. The rules have been created. I just double check. Port 3000, rules updated. SSH, rule, very important. Rules updated. HTTP, rules updated. HTTPS, rules updated. Now it's asking me to confirm that I want to enable the firewall. Had I made a mistake and not enabled the SSH rule, I would know after I enable this firewall, I would no longer be able to access the server. So it's very important that you double check that you've created all the firewall rules. I click on yes, bada bing, bada boom. Now my server firewall is on. So going back to this handy dandy little childish chart here, I set up the AWS firewall security rules, or security groups, to only allow traffic on port 22, port 80, and port 443, right? I didn't allow port 3000 from here. I only allowed 22, 80, 443. Then on the server itself, I set up the service firewall to further only allow 22, 80, 443, and 3000. So it had any other servers in here, and one of them potentially got hacked or something like that. If that system tried to bombard this server with traffic over any other particular port outside of 80, 443, 22, and 3000, it would be blocked. So it's giving me that two-layered firewall protection. Very important if you're a security first organization. So now that we have our instance created, now that we have our security in place, our first level security, you could say, we now want to get Git, wget, and Apache installed. How do you do that? Well, you just run this handy dandy little apt install command here to install wget, Git, and Apache 2. Again, we saw that we have Git installed, but it doesn't really matter. Again, for people who may not have it installed. Hello. What's going on? There we go. I'm not sure why that was wrong. It's weird. There we go. Somehow that turned into a weird character. So we installed Apache now. So if everything worked out, my firewall is set up. External AWS firewall and internal. I now have Apache installed. I should be be able to, yep, boom. Through the IP address, I have the default Apache 2 page for Ubuntu. But we're not done, so let's keep going. In order to have a secure system or an encryption with SSL certificate, I need to enable this module in Apache. I also need to enable a proxy module. If you recall, in the beginning of this video, I said I'm going to use Apache to give me a proxy so that I can reach my Git over the standard port 80 and then later with SSL port 443 instead of having to reach it over the port 3000, which is the default port that Gitea uses. So I want to enable the Apache module SSL. I want to Apache to enable module proxy, Apache to enable module proxy balancer, proxy HTTP, and then I want to restart Apache. So those are the commands I'm going to run right here. Everything went great, you know, it restarted Apache. So now I have all of these modules in place in Apache to allow me to set up my proxy and tunnel port 80 traffic internally through to port 3000. I have here the slide to test Apache. I just made modifications, so I want to verify that those modifications did not gum up my system, right? I enabled these modules, not super big changes, but you still want to recheck. Yep, everything works, so no mistakes so far. The next thing I want to do, if you remember the itinerary, is I want to install the database, Mariodb. So I need to install the server and the client. So I just copied this handy dandy command in there. This one takes a little longer than the updating of the packages, but not super long. Getting impatient. It's taking away from my 30 minutes. This is taking away from my 30 minutes. Boom. Done. So, just to kind of be a stickler, I want to stop it. I want to stop the database server. I want to start the database server. And then I want to enable it as a service. Enabling it as a service in case the server crashes. When it comes back online, if it's not a service, then it would not start with the server. So now, again, security first, I want to use the MySQL secure installation command. That's going to give me a bunch of questions. Like, do you want to set a root password? Because by default, when MySQL is installed, there's no root password. So you just type in MySQL -u root space -p. You hit enter without any password, and you can make commands into the database server. That's a no-no. I then remove anonymous users, disallow root login remotely because you don't need it. You only need to be able to access the server as root locally. Remove test database, and then reload the privileges. That's what this command is going to allow me to do. So enter the current password for root. As I said before, there is no password, so I just hit enter. Now, do I want to set a root password? Of course I do. I am going to use this one. So, do I want to remove the anonymous user? Yes. Do I want to disallow root login? Yes. Do I want to remove a test database? Yes. Do I want to reload the privileges? This ultimately is supposed to, sometimes it doesn't work, it's supposed to refresh all of the rules, all of the privileges of the database so that immediately the password I just set for root is required. Sometimes you'll do MySQL -u root -p, and you'll enter in the password, you get an error because the privileges didn't take effect. So in order to double and triple check and make 100% sure that happens, I usually reload the MySQL server instance anyway. So we have our database. We have Apache, we have our database. Now what we want to do is we actually want to set up, we have our database server, excuse me. I want to set up the database for Gitea. So I access it. It asked me for the password. I entered the password, my new root password, and boom, that was required. So I'm going to create a database Gitea. Done. I'm then going to create a user, Gitea user, and I'm going to stick with this dumb password here. This fits in, but you should definitely use a secure password. Caps, lowercase, numbers, special characters, everything you can to make sure that that password is secure and protected. So once I have my user created, I then need to say this user, Gitea user, is allowed. Has all privileges: read, write, update, delete, destroy, all privileges to the database Gitea and all of its tables. Once that's done, flush privileges and then exit out of the database client. So now I have my server with 2 firewall layers. I have Apache on it. I have Git, verified that Git's on there. I have wget. I have my database. Now it's time to get busy. Let's install Gitea. The first thing I need to do in order for Gitea, or the first thing I want to do for Gitea, is I want to set up a separate user. I want to set up a separate user and group. So I'm calling the user and the group Git. Right. So I added a user Git, I added a group Git, and I added the user Git to the group Git. This is a prettified version, but this probably is not going to work for you. That's why you should just take this string one, only because of carriage returns and how it's in PowerPoint and all this other kind of crap. So once I have my user, once I have my group, for Gitea, I need to create a few folders and give them permissions and assign them to specific user/groups. This isn't like either OS X or Windows where you get an install package, an exe, and you click on it and it does everything for you. This you have to do by yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory, variable lib Gitea, and then we'll make directories, variable lib Gitea, custom data, indexers, public, and log. And then I'm going to change ownership of specific ones to the owner, to Git and Git group. I'm going to change the permissions of these specific folders. Then I'm going to make a directory called etc/Gitea, because that is where my app.ini, which has all of the configuration settings for Gitea, is going to be stored. I'm going to change ownership of that area, and then I'm going to change the permissions. Boom, done. Quick. So now everything's ready. We are ready to have the beast. So all I do is I do wget, and I am downloading this package from Gitea. The current version is 1.4.1.1. So I'm downloading the latest stable release, and I'm calling it Gitea. Takes 30 seconds or 40 seconds or so for it to download. So there it is. There is Gitea. So the package is downloaded, but it's just a file. Right now it's just a file. What do I need to do? I need to make the file executable, because only when it's executable can it run. So I do chmod +x makes Gitea then an executable application. And what do I then need to do? I want to put it into my user local bin area. So I move Gitea to my local bin area. So now Gitea is in place. What do I next want to do? Well, I want to create it as a service. Again, just like the Mariodb database software, when the server reboots for whatever reason, I want this to come back online without me having to log into the server and start it manually. This should be a service. So what do? I create a file, etc. systemd system gitea.service. And I paste this stuff in here without even reading it right into this file. Gives a description, after syslog target, after network log target, then it says restart 2 seconds. It's a simple type. The user and group is git, which we just created. I'm going to save this. Boom. So now if my system restarts, Gitea would start automatically. So now we pretty much have everything there. Now we can go and see whether or not the lookup get to deploy.dev. What happened if I spelled it right? So what was my IP address? What was my IP address? 5289.207.91, and I have 5289.207.91. Boom! DNS records are up to date. Now, if I refresh this here, the IP, I have Gitea installed. Oh, yes. Where am I? I have Gitea installed, but it is not started. So I want to reload the daemon. I want to enable Gitea as a service because I created the service file, but I haven't enabled it as a service. And I want to start it. Bing, bang, boom. Done. So now, if I refresh this IP, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. Why is it going to happen? Because I have not enabled the proxy. So I need to go into etc. Apache 2 sites available ls. Now you can create your own virtual host. I'm just going to stick with the default here. Oops. And there are 2 things I'm going to do here. First thing is I am going to set up the server name. I want my server to respond as I am git.deploy.dev. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the proxy, and I'm going to set up the proxy so that it directs all port 80 traffic, port 80 port pass everything that comes through, in this case port 80, through to localhost 3000 with non-canonical. That's what I want. I also want the proxy pass reverse everything from localhost to 3000. Save that. System control restart Apache 2. So now if I refresh this, takes a second, boom. Over the IP address, we have our installation script. Now, this is where we have to remember the information that we put in earlier when we created our database. We created the database called Gitea. The name of the user was Gitea user. And then the password was this relatively insecure password. Not only is it insecure, well, it's insecure because I'm showing it to you, but whatever. This server's not going to live very long. So I put in my Gitea user username and password. Now this is where we want to. This is the greatest Git in the whole world. Put in an application name, repository root path. You don't need to change any of this stuff here, especially Git the user. What you do want to change is the domain. What is our domain? Git.deploy.dev. Whatever your domain or subdomain is what you're going to want to put in there, not mine. SSH port, leave it at 22. HTTP port, leave it at 3000 because again we're using the proxy. And then here again, this is where we want to change it. Now I put that. Where was I here? No, here. No, here. Yeah. So these are important. In case something goes haywire, you're going to want to go into the etc/gitea/app.ini file and make the corrections. I'll show you that in a second. But let's get back to here. We want git.deploy.dev :3000. So now you can set up your own SMT service settings for sending out emails, whatever. You know, if you use Office 365 or if you have an internal mail server at your company, whatever it is, you can set it up here. Under the server and other service settings, because this is this Git is only for me or for me and employees that work in my organization, I'm going to disable self-registration. I don't want just any Yahoo coming in, registering and getting access to my Git. It's partially why my client said, we don't like cloud shared Git repositories. We want you to have your own that you're responsible for, right? So I disable self-registration. You could read up on these other settings here. It's all very interesting, all very helpful under specific circumstances. But again, for me, I'm just doing this base right here. This is the default to get you up and running as fast as possible with a working, secure Git. I need to enter in a admin. Give him a password. And put in my email. Bada bing, bada boom. Install. Now you don't need to save it. What is it doing now? It is taking these settings. It's creating, there is an app. There's already an app.ini file, but it only has like a security hash token. It's taking all of these settings. It is going to the database, creating all the database tables that are required. And it is also updating the app.ini file with all of these settings like the domain, the host, etc. So, let's see. So, it's trying to put me on port 3000, which I know doesn't work. So, that's why I'm getting this error. You're not necessarily going to get that error. Well, you might get that error, but it's very quick to change, very quick to fix. So I have my server, I have Apache, Security, I have Apache, I have a database. I now have Gitea installed. A little bit of a hiccup in terms of the port 3000, but that's all fine. It's not a problem. It's very easy to fix. But I want to show you something. Gitea app ini. See, look. Here's my internal token. Here is the user I went on. It's in production mode. Here is my name. Greatest Git in the whole world. Right? It has me as for my database information that I entered in before. It has my SSH domain. It has my domain. It has the port. And it has the root URL. This was all created. All of this information was created based on default settings as well as based on what I entered. So now, I don't want to go over port 80, and I don't want to go over port 3000. I want to go over port 443. I want a secure connection. So we're going to install Let's Encrypt certbot. Encrypt, not encrypt. Encrypt certbot, and create my own SSL certificate. It's really quick, really easy with Apache. I need to use Snap. Takes a couple seconds. Download Snap. This is certbot. Mount Snap. Copy Snap. Download Snap certbot. Stable version. Fetch. Mount. Start. Boom. Done. So now I want to create a symlink. Oops. I want to create a symlink to ensure that the certbot command can run. If I just type certbot, that command can run. And now I want to create my certificate. Enter the email address. So I want to accept the terms and conditions. I don't want to share that information. See, the server found my server name. The DNS records have been updated so that my git.deploy.dev goes to my IP address. So certbot needs to authenticate and verify that I own this domain. So it's going to run a couple of things. But I'm going to type in one here. Hit enter. And you can see it's enabled Apache rewrite module. Right? That does it for me automatically. It's waiting for a verification. That's what I was talking about before. It verified. It sent a ping back and said, okay, does this domain exist? Where is it? It verified that this domain is there. It cleaned up challenges, created a challenge and cleaned up a challenge. It created the SSL for the virtual host as 000 minus default minus LE for Let's Encrypt minus SSL.config. It deployed the certificate. It enabled the available site. It enabled Apache rewrite. So any calls to port 80 will be redirected to port 443. what's going on here. And then it actually rebooted Apache for me. So if I type in http git.deploy.dev, what does it do? It redirects me to HTTPS automatically. So I can't access it over HTTP anymore, port 80. I can only access this system over port 443. As you can see, it is installed. It is reachable under my git.deploy.dev. I can log in with my admin. If I entered the password name correctly. It's empty. It's an empty Git, but this is my own GitHub. This is on my server, right? I go to admin panel. I am the admin, so I can do anything. I can create users. I can create organizations. Let's create a great organization. World's greatest org. Oops, no, I already did it. World's greatest org. You don't have to have spaces there. And then I want to create a repository. My repo. I want to make it private. I can add a description. Blah, 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 blah. I can set up a git ignore file. I can set up licensing. I can do readme default. I can initialize this repository with selected files and template. And I create repository, and as you can see, this looks really similar to GitHub. So you have, in less than 30 minutes, or about 30 minutes, created your own self-hosted Git repo. Just recap real quick what we did. What did we do? We set up our self-hosted Git repository with Gitea platform in less than 30 minutes. Our agenda was install all the prerequisites. I mean, I set up the firewall and AWS for you. I set up the EC2 for you. I made sure Git, wget, and Apache were installed. I set up the database for you. I set up Gitea for you. I set up Let's Encrypt for you. Now you have your very own GitHub. Boom. You're welcome. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm going to be giving you more tips, tricks, and help in terms of setting up in all of your DevOps environments, getting you your security principles in place and processes reviewed or improved to make sure you don't get hacked and make sure that you can work as efficiently as you want to and need to in order to maximize your time, reduce the amount of debugging you got to do, and just really do some cool stuff. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next time. Take care.
Don't forget to ride. Farewell.